So let us look at Elijah as a prophet. Let us look at Elijah as a prophet. So we'll start with the personal background. Then we'll touch on the historical situation that was there when he prophesied. It's quite a bit longer than what we were doing in the past 2 days. So the name Elijah means Yahweh is my God. He came from Tishba in Gilead, a small village east of the Jordan. So Tishba was settled by the Manasseh tribe, and a few people settled there before Israel appeared as a nation. So that area called Tishba had like, Elijah the Tishbite had a few contacts with the Canaanites and other nations, which enabled him to preserve the Sinai traditions without pollution from Canaanite religious activities. So that's an important thing, because that personal background helped him, later on shaped his message, because he had sort of a monotheistic centralized message in which he was there to defend monotheism, because he prophesied in an area in which Baalism was rampant, in which the people were worshipping many gods. So area yakakurira inonzi Tishba inonzi yanga iri away from, because chiri kupa influence yekuti maIsraelites ade zvekunamata zvidhori stereki, inyaya yekuti maareas anga akavapoteredza ndo zvavaiita. Handiri kubata senzi yacho. So Elijah kwanga kakurira kwakusina izvozvo. So people in the north were therefore more conservative than others. Samaria was associated with the feudalism and commercial civilization. There were numerous Canaanites who ignored the Mosaic covenant, and this is the reason why Elijah attacked Baalism when he came to Samaria. So he grew up in an environment with strict Mosaic monotheism, little exposure to Canaanite culture, and was shocked by what he experienced when he moved to what? To Samaria. Because in Samaria there was rampant Baalism. Makurura akaita, he grew up in a very conservative society in which followed the laws of Moses to the dot. So Elijah was outraged and waged a war against what? Baalism, right? So what was the socio-economic background then? During the time of Elijah, the rich accumulated a lot of wealth through exploiting the poor. That's what they did. So Elijah is coming through here as a prophet of social justice. He was well against social injustice. And social injustice in this context is whereby the rich abused the poor. So the poor had their land taken away. They were forced to borrow from the rich at a very high interest rates and used their land as mortgages, but ended up losing it. Varombo vaita basa rekukwereteswa mari nevapfumi, then vakwereteswa mari vonzi tiri kubata land yenyu as sort of collateral security. So vaitoziva kuti vanhu ava obvious havatipichi, havatombotipi mari, havatombokwanisi kutipa mari. So at the end of the day they could take their land. So the case of Naboth against Ahab may represent an example of many such cases. So the drought which was declared by Elijah may have also caused many people to also lose their land. So the poor people lost their land through that drought. So it was against this background that Elijah appeared on the scene and rebuked the leader and the rich for oppressing the poor. For instance, his rebuke on Ahab for taking Naboth's vineyards and having him killed. So that's the sort of the background that was there. We also have the religious background. So after the death of Ahijah, no other prophet appeared in Israel until Elijah began his ministry. So by the time when Elijah began to prophesy, Baalism was being promoted at the expense of Yahwehism. The Baal prophets were imported from Phoenicia by Jezebel, Ahab's wife, and Jezebel was what? Was Ahab's wife. She was not an Israelite or neither a northerner or a southerner. She's the one who brought in a full-blown Baalism in Egypt. You get the sense? So Jezebel wanted to wipe out Yahwehism and to make Baalism a national religion, she terrorized and killed Yahweh's prophets. A temple of Baal was also built in Samaria, and the prophets of Baal were given financial support as well as protection. There were so many, they were even paid by the kings. So consequently, the worship of Yahweh was at the verge of collapsing. So it was against this background that Elijah appeared at the scene and waged a war against what? Against Baalism. Most of the Baal prophets and all the idols were brought through what? Through Jezebel from Phoenicia. So that's the war that was. What was when I introduced the prophetic series, I said you have to master the mandate of each and every prophet. That's what I said, right? So what was Elijah's message? What was Elijah's goal? What was the duty of Elijah? What centralized Elijah's message? What? Ndati Elijah chiprofita chake chachiri centralized on what? Elijah aiprofita chi, basa rake rari rekuprofitira chi. Yes, he was upholding. I want people who are confident. You cannot be lawyers. So the kingdom of Israel was divided into two, the north Israel and south Judah. So in the north the son of Omri persuaded policies of religious toleration and freedom to achieve unity and national integration between the Israelites and the Canaanites. So like Ahab was under what they call the Omri dynasty. His duty was to sort of come up with policies which integrated both the Israelites and the Canaanites. So Ahab employed a neutral approach, like he was in between the Canaanite and the Israelites, So his aim was to become a powerful king of the ancient Near East. He wanted to replace Israel's conception of kingship with the absolute monarchy. However, under the Mosaic law, a king was supposed to be appointed by what? By Yahweh. So Ahab and Elijah were bound to clash because of those different political ideologies which caused them to what? To fight. So Elijah, because of the fact that he was not happy, and such, he proclaimed a drought, which was a direct challenge to Baal, because Baal was the god of fertility or the god of rain. You get the sense? So Elijah wanted to defy that. What did he do? He stopped the rain. He prayed for the drought. So it was intended to be a lesson to the Israelites that Yahweh and not Baal was the God who controls rain and fertility. So Baal was not able to bring the rain for 3 consecutive years, which implies that he was a what? He was a false god. So when people were giving sacrifices to Baal, they were giving sacrifices with the mind that Baal was the god of rains, Baal was the god of fertility. So like Moses and Samuel before him, Elijah was a man of intercessory praying. So he interceded for the drought to end later on. So that's when the most important aspect to do with Elijah comes through, the Mount Carmel contest. Because on the Mount Carmel contest, he clashed with the Baal prophets to prove kuti anonaisa amwari wemunana ndeupi between wenyu maBaal newangwini. So during the reign of Ahab, the existence of Yahwehism was threatened by Baalism. So Ahab, like I said, he married Jezebel, who imported Baal prophets from Phoenicia. She built a temple for Baal in Samaria and also introduced counting prostitution and child sacrifices. Because Baal knows so sacrifice something like that. So it was against this background that Elijah had a contest against Baal prophets and those of Asherah on Mount Carmel to demonstrate who worshipped the true God. So Elijah accused the people of his time for following Baalism. The people were like two-sided. Some of them were saying we were under Baalism. and some of saying we're under Yahwehism. So it was now the platform, right, for Elijah to prove that Mwari wechokwadi ndeupi. So his advice to the people were either to follow God or bow and not to limp between the two. So in his opinion, he said that Yahweh is a jealous God who does not tolerate being worshipped alongside other gods. So the objective of the context was for the people to decide there and there on who was the true God who deserved to be worshipped. So both Elijah and the prophets of Baal agreed to perform their rites to demonstrate that the God who answers by the fire is the real and the true God. So the prophets of Baal lashed themselves in ecstatic frenzy, you know, at the Baal context, they created altars. And the Vaida konoti Mwari anonza moto ndeupendezo. Baal prophets akatanga una matachizi cheka, and they were in ecstatic frenzy and they began to dance around the altar, but no one answered them. When Elijah stepped forward, his first act was to repair the abandoned altar of Yahweh as well as having water poured in it. Elijah akatoti dirai mvura altar macho, you know. So he cried to Yahweh, and the supernatural fire descended from heaven and burnt the sacrifice. So Elijah then seized the 450 Baal prophets under ecstasy and he killed them. So that contest demonstrated that Yahweh and not Baal was the real and true God who the Israelites were supposed to what? To worship. So when Elijah killed the Baal prophets, Jezebel was not happy. He threatened to kill what? Elijah. So that's when Elijah flew to Mount Horeb. So sometimes they can use it interchangeably. They are referring to it as Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. So the flight of Elijah to Horeb showed that he was a lonely prophet, and the prophetic ministry, his prophetic ministry was associated with the danger and, you know. But that flight to Mount Horeb was important. Why was it important? Number one, it signifies a renewal of the covenant, thereby showing a close link between prophecy, the sacred law, and the covenant. And Mount Horeb was also central in that it was where Moses was given the law, and the role of the prophet as covenant mediators is outlined. And Horeb is seen as the source of faith of Israel, faith, and so prophets are seen as reformers who took their stand on the ancient ground of Mount Sinai. And it was on Mount Horeb that the theophany took place, which is similar to the one Moses experienced. There was an experiencing of God coming through in the Mount Horeb. And again, we can draw similarities or we can draw analogies with what Elijah faced and what also Moses faced. So Moses was the covenant mediator, the Mosaic covenant mediator, and here Elijah is trying to maintain the purity of that covenant. So the cave on which Elijah lodged resembled the cleft of the rock in which Moses was sheltered while Yahweh passed by, revealing the divine glory, you know. So there comes the issue of Ahab and Naboth's vineyard, right? The issue of Ahab and Naboth's vineyard. So in Israel, there's a question which asks about the land, right? Just the land under our FRI syllabus. So in Israel, the land belonged to Yahweh, who was the ultimate king over Israel, although there were some custodians on earth. So it was regarded as sacred, which explains why Israel was regarded as the what? As the Holy Land. So the land was given as a promise to Abraham and ultimately to the Jewish people as their everlasting what? Possession. So according to the covenant, land had to remain in the family and the tribe to which God had given it. So if a family takes a certain land, they are going to pass it from this generation to this generation up to the next generation, right? And it was not supposed to be what? To be sold. Because originally the land belonged to what? To Yahweh. So it was not supposed to be sold according to Numbers 36 verse 7 and according to Leviticus 25 verse 23. So this explains that why Naboth refused to sell his vineyard to King Ahab, because it was not his personal land, but it was what? It was family property. So God was the ultimate owner of the land, but it was also owned on earth with the family. So the family was supposed to keep the land throughout the existence of all other coming generations of that family. So This made Ahab sad, right? Ahab was not happy. Bible not Ahab akatosvika kumba anga akatsamwa ndonzi akatoramba chikafu here. Then Jezebel ndiye akazoronga kuti vauraise Naboth so that they could take the land. So Jezebel promised to get Naboth's vineyard for her husband in her own way. So Naboth was falsely accused of blasphemy and treason and trying to topple the king. So they stoned him to death, and together with his two sons. And Ahab thought that he was now free to take possession by the vineyard. So that's when Elijah went on to denounce or to condemn Ahab for what he did. So the incident provides an insight that Israelite prophets provided checks and balances for the king. They spoke against injustice and acted as the voice of the voiceless. The voiceless in this context is what? Is Naboth. Yes. So the passage also shows that Israelite prophets acted as champions of ethical demands of the what? Of the Mosaic covenant and the Mosaic laws. So they were also upholders of the ideology of Yahwehism, which every person was equal, but the law, right? So the other reason why the land was important in Israel is, number one, their ancestors were buried in that land, right? Number two, it contains Israel's holiest cities, e.g. Jerusalem, Hebron, and Tiberias. And they believe that their sins will be absolved if they are buried there. So all rites, all ceremonies are supposed to be performed in the land of Israel, according to the Torah. So in one way or the other, or the last point that I would like to put it across is like their land was their what? Was their heritage, you know. Their land was their heritage. So Elijah was quite a true prophet. He was very important. Like he upheld monotheism by killing of Baal prophets and performing miracles. He was the father of prophetic guilds. He also transferred his authority to Elisha, which shows his democracy. Talk of the contest at Mount Carmel. He declared drought in Israel to prove that Yahweh and not Baal was the true God who brings rain. He also acted for the needy, like when he helped that widow, and also he was also the voice of the voiceless, and he denounced the king for wrongdoing. He demonstrated his prophetic authority over the kings, thus seeking to guarantee the preservation of the worship of Yahweh and Yahweh's prophets. And his journey to Mount Horeb revived contact with Yahweh, you know. So that's the power of what? Of Elijah, right? So there was also Elisha. We don't have much to say on Elisha. Elisha was the what? Was the protege. Elisha was sort of Elijah's son. So the word Elisha means God saves. He came from a rich family, which owned about 12 yoke of oxen in the Jordan Valley. He lived in Samaria, and he acted as Elijah's servant, but taking full responsibility. And he also became father of the prophetic guilds. His ministry contains more miracles than that of Elijah. Elisha was more of a what? A miracle worker. And you get the sense? Yes. Like in number one, he performed a lot of miracles. Like when he struck the waters of the Jordan using Elijah's mantle, and the waters were parted before him. So he healed the water at Jericho by throwing salt into it. The salt was bad and the land unfruitful. He also helped the widow of the sons of prophets by increasing the jars of oil when a creditor would have taken her 2 children and slaves in the place of payment of a debt. So he resurrected the son of the Shunammite woman. There are so many miracles he performed. Fed 100 men with 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain, and there were some leftovers. You can read 2 Kings, especially chapter 4 and 5. That's when you learn about the miracles that he performed. So he healed A-level into that one on wearing a foot. He healed Naaman, the Syrian leper. He made an axe of one of the sons of prophets which had fallen into the water to float on top of the water. At Bethel, he cast 42 boys. He cast the 42 boys with jeered at him, and they were torn apart by 2 sheer bears. He struck the Syrian raiding army with blindness and led them into the city of Samaria, where he caused their eyes to open. A magician. He was a top class, a miracle worker. He called fire from heaven, and it consumed a captain of soldiers with his 50 soldiers. He filled trenches with water during the Moabite war. Even after his death, a dead man was put into his grave and was revived upon touching the bones of Elisha. So it is because of these miracles that some scholars would like to call Elisha a social leader than a prophet. So this is because the majority of the miracles were intended to help members of the what? Of the society. Ukatasama miracles ake aiperforma majinji, they were tailored to save some members of the society. However, miracle working was also part and parcel of prophetic roles. He foretold the future. He prophesied that the Shunammite woman would be a son, and his prophecy was fulfilled. He was also ecstatic. That's prophetic. He was a man of prayer. He was also consulted by kings. So that's it for Elijah and Elisha. We are now getting into the canonical prophets. So tomorrow we'll start with Amos. Right. Tomorrow we'll start with what? With Amos. Yes. We'll start with Amos. Yes.